The Diplomacy of the Knife by C.M Caplan. Imagine the uses for one who is and yet is not of the royal bloodline. Hostage exchanges, martial alliances, quiet work. The Diplomacy of the Knife. Robin Hobb, Assassin's Apprentice. Part 1, Chapter 1. After everything, when I was staring down the guillotine with shaved wrists and broken teeth, I decided this was the only fitting way to go. The instant awaiting me, when gravity would slam a burning razor down on the back of my neck, had been set in motion long before our war with Edgar first began to take shape. Though the war certainly accelerated matters. Ed set the tone for our conflict early on. We learned quickly that he was avoiding pitched battles, staying out of the way of Anois's forces. His troop movements were small, compact. A dozen men and women in gas masks and lobstered armour, breaking into banks, seizing money. They'd burn some ledgers and stocks and get out fast before Anois could organise a response. On a certain level, I had to admire it. So far he'd avoided a mass casualty event, warded off the threat of a gaunt plague. And in the coming days, Anois responded in kind. She and Mercedes worked together to set up a blockade over land. They put money, and effort, and soldiers in breaking Edgar's supply lines. They ran up his tabs on every expense he required to keep his rebellion running. They bombed his ports, the cafes where his supporters met, the fortresses his people hunkered down in. They fired on any Reacher House's ships that strayed too close to the coastline, and sabotaged imports on guns and ammo and food. And I just had to sit there as this news trickled back to Mercy House and hope that the next newspaper to hit the stands, the next headline to grace a front page, might herald something worth celebrating. I tried to focus on the Mercy Guard. Anois had put me in charge of them when she declared war. There were 95 of them in total, one for each bone in the mastodon. It was my duty to draw up everyone's schedules, figure out where to place each member throughout the day, and to investigate them for corruption. Anois suspected a traitor, a leak. She wanted me to root them out. It felt a bit odd handing orders down in the first place. I preferred to be on the receiving end of things. At least that way, all I had to do was follow through. Like when Anois told me she wanted to meet with me a few weeks into the conflict. All I had to do was show up. She turned up late to her own meeting. I'd been about to radio her for an update when her office door peeled open. "Sorry I'm late." She clutched a package in white knuckles, a 3-foot box as wide across my palm, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with red twine. "What took you so long?" And what was the box for? Had someone sent her a gift? She sat down behind her desk and leaned the package next to an absolutely precarious sheath of papers. "We got an enormous tip this morning. I was told there might be something going down in Lover's Landing." That was certainly curious. I wasn't sure what could go down there, since reaching that insignificant beach by land or sea was a total nightmare. It should have been an easy fact check. "Were you able to verify it?" She shrugged. "Not really, though I had to leave early to go to get breakfast with an ambassador from the outlying lands. There's been a spate of pirate attacks all up the coastline. They think the pirates are working for Edgar. He might be trying to run a naval blockade." "Why would he need pirates? Isn't he the only one of us with a fleet? He'd kicked off this war by burning our ships. Why go to the trouble if he was just going to shell out for an armada?" "He can't completely cut our trade without angering the outlying islands. They're neutral now, supplying both of us. But if he roughs them up too much, the outlying islands might declare they're on our side. Does that mean the pirates are his proxies?" "We can't prove it, but..." "That does sound like the point of a proxy. Who's leading these guys? Do these pirates have a name?" Anois tilted her head. Would you believe me if I told you River Cassidy was the one taking credit for the attacks? You're joking. There was no way. The albino? You know another River Cassidy? I didn't. She was the daughter of an old mercenary, Benjamin Cassidy, who travelled between the three great houses with a band of about a dozen men and women. They offered themselves up for whatever suicide mission the landed gentry might need. Whoever made it back alive was free to spend their share of the exorbitant payday on as much drugs and booze as they could afford. River was often fostered here whenever her dad was in town doing a job for ours. She was about 8 years older than us, which meant she was too cool to give us any attention. I'd had the biggest, goofiest crush on her when I was a kid. One day, during a celebration at a nearby beach when I was 8, Edgar had dared me to steal her lip balm. I'd agreed because at least then she might look at me. She'd caught me in the act and kicked sand into my eyes in the ensuing scuffle. She nearly broke my arm before I was willing to surrender it to her. Rumour has it, Anwar leaned across her desk, she's using her spells to buy out control of every mercenary company willing to sell their science swords. She wants to collect them all under one banner. She wants a monopoly. I couldn't decipher if it was admiration or frustration infecting Anwar's tone. She had always loved nothing more than a worthy foe, provided she could actually beat them. Are we going to have to deal with her? I wasn't about to complain if she came back into our lives to beat the shit out of me. Though, it would certainly complicate matters if that beating put the fate of the nation at risk. We'll leave that to the outlying islands. She's up in Crown Cove assembling gangs of pirates and mercenary companies. We know where to find her if she causes too much trouble. Though, it'd be quite the undertaking whenever we have to go after her, so let's hope the outlying islands have got it covered. In the meantime, she put her hand on the package she had brought in. She looked down at it, and then at me. A knowing smirk fussed with one corner of her mouth. She passed the package across the table to me. I've got something for you. Oh? I pulled the package onto my side of the desk. The gift was heavier than I expected it to be. Don't shake it, Anouise said. How'd she know that was what I was planning to do? Is it fragile? Just open it, you'll see. I unsheathed the knife I'd stolen from Dad years ago and slit the packaging tape. There was a brick at the bottom of the box. An old trick Anouise had inherited from Dad. He used to weigh them down, disguise his gifts. He'd once given Desmond an ancient historical tome disguised in a cereal box, weighed down with cans of beer. Anouise's gift to me was wedged between the brick and the box. Is that? I stuffed my face into the mouth of the cardboard. You didn't. Stunned shock hollowed out my stomach. A stiff wind could have sent me floating down the hall. I shut my eyes. There was no way. I couldn't breathe. I was going to cry. It was a double-edged science sword, completely black, war rapier model. I'd seen it before. I pulled it free from the box and its scabbard. It was slightly shorter than a regular rapier, with a blade that was slightly wider. A deep furrow was trenched into the centre of the black blade. A complex lace of science steel and wirework formed a hilt around my hand, and the knuckle bow doubled as a trigger for the thyroid battery, to pump the science steel full of thyroid hormones and heat up the blade. I stood up, squeezed the trigger. A shimmer shield yawned out from the wirework, panelled over the gaps in the complex hilt. Every time I moved, the plasma sang. Anouise, this is insane. I'd never seen her so giddy. You like it? I knew this sword. Its name was Rhapsody, because it handled like a dream. It was one of the two ancestral swords that belonged to Mercy House. It was the sister sword of Reverie, the king's longsword. Or, in this case, the queen's. It had been in our family since the founding of the Mercy dynasty. The blades were first wielded by the High King Torrigan Mercy, shortly after the Second Annihilation. Right before his death, he'd gifted Reverie to his firstborn son, Indrid I, Dad's own namesake. Rhapsody went to his second-born. Our family had lived by that tradition ever since. The ruling monarch inherits Reverie at their coronation, and whoever's heir apparent assumed ownership of Rhapsody. The only time that this wasn't the case was when the current owner gifted the sword to someone else. Dad had done that right before lymphoma took him out. He'd gifted Reverie to Anois the same day he was diagnosed with it. It was an attempt to cement her reign, for all the good it did. She was supposed to pass Rhapsody on to Edgar after her coronation. Now it had come to me. I stared at my reflection in the blade. You can't give me this. Anois blanched. The hell do you mean I can't? You broke your sabre out in the forest wall, didn't you? I don't deserve. I took an experimental swing. Oh, shit. It really did live up to its name. Damn thing handled beautifully. Like the blade knew where to go before I did. Look at it, Anois. This is too nice. She laughed. Do you want me to order you to just take it? I never thought of any weapon as a work of art before, but this thing clearly qualified. You nearly died out there a few weeks ago, Peter. Let me do something nice for you. Just take it. It's yours. I'm giving it to you. But what if I break it? This seemed like a lot of responsibility. I wasn't sure I could handle this. Isn't there somewhere else who else would I give it to? Desmond? Well, he is next in line, isn't he? He was roughly 30 seconds older than me. It'd be safer in his hands, right? He would never let it leave the scabbard. It was supposed to go to Edgar, but... She shrugged. Guess he couldn't wait until after my coronation. Well, I shrugged. If I'm stealing it from Edgar... It suits you, Anois said. You think? It wasn't exactly a sabre, but then again, maybe it was time for a change of pace. It goes well with your new title, Captain of the Mercy Guard. Speaking of which... we were coming to the meat of things, weren't we? Mom's got an incoming shipment. I need you with her in the basement as security. That seemed odd. Why would Mom willingly subject herself to my presence? Had she requested this? Or did someone else suggest this course of action to Anois? She's never needed me for security before. Anois leaned across the desk. Can you keep a secret? Of course I can, I lied. She spared a glance at the door, then whispered. Avram Maunders says there was a break-in a few nights ago. My heart rattled like an ancient engine. I sat up straighter. Why wasn't I informed of this? Anois chewed her lip. I wasn't sure if I should tell you at first. Mom didn't want you to know. I think it hurt her pride. She used to handle security issues in the basement by herself when Dad was alive, but... I don't know. I thought I should tell you anyway, she added. You said you needed me to trust you, so I'm trying to do that. I wasn't sure what to make of this. I kind of admired that she was telling me now, though I wish she'd mentioned it sooner, but this was better than no trust at all, wasn't it? Baby steps, you know. What was stolen? Maunders says Mom is still trying to determine that. Apparently she found a dagger in her bedroom, something the intruder must have left behind. She wasn't sure if it was a mistake or some kind of calling card. She didn't even tell me about any of this. Avram came to me about it when she told him. And now you want me down there to make sure everything runs smoothly? What is it that's being shipped in tonight? I couldn't back out, not after Anois had gifted me Rhapsody. Of all the things. But I didn't like flying blind, especially if I was going to be alone with Mom. What's coming? Anois stared at the stretch of seat between her knees. Bodies, she said. Corpses.